slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no.
What is going on, everybody? How are we doing on this glorious Friday, November the 8th? What in the bloody HE double hockey sticks are the Cowboys doing trading for a wide receiver? This feels like a move for next season rather than now. You had the Commanders trading for what you could call a top defensive back, but was it the right decision to give up that much draft capital? The Lions got their help on defensive line, and you have to know that they were trying to get Myles Garrett. Imagine Garrett on the Lions. Oh my God. The Steelers made a little splash, per se, as well, that could add to the explosiveness of their offense. Billy Napier's seat as Florida's football coach, you would have thought, was extremely scorching hot, like the lakes of fire hot. But apparently, the entire world was wrong on that, and it's looking like it is a secure job for the foreseeable future. We will dive into this discussion and give you my perspective on the topic. You have some explosive college football names over the weekend, so we will be giving you a nice little preview of these games and what to look forward to in these matchups. So that will be the plan for today's show. And welcome to The Burn with Ryan Van Diep, presented to you by Hot Zone Sports. The information you need to know, built with you in mind. For the people, by the people, and with the people. Join the Hot Zone Sports community today. Make sure you like the video, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Now, on to today's episode, and boy, is it a banger. It has been a crazy week in the sports world, and particularly in the NFL. There was the trade deadline a couple of days ago, and we are going to deep dive into that. The Cowboys made an absolutely ridiculous move at the trade deadline, but had a lot of people scratching their heads, wondering what in the bloody hell are the Cowboys doing right now? So I will give my perspective on that. The Commanders, I think, made a pretty solid move in trading for what you would call a star cornerback. The only problem with him is that he is injured quite consistently. The Lions didn't make a big splash per se, but they did complete a trade that is going to be highly beneficial to their defensive line after the injury of Aiden Hutchinson. Steelers added a couple of solid players, including Mike Williams, who, interesting story, he had the choice choose between signing with the Jets or signing with the Steelers just last year. And he was obviously regretting that decision of signing with the Jets. Oh my God. Side topic, Aaron Rodgers obviously does not give a rip about any of his players, except maybe Devontae Adams. So let's get into it. Let's start off with the Cowboys. So first off, we're going to start off with the Dallas Cowboys. Everybody knows the history. Jerry Jones, he's an oil man, so he's always trying to strike gold. But for years, he has been making confusing decisions, to say the least, and they made a trade for Jonathan Mingo, and unless you are an avid fan of the SEC, you probably wouldn't even recognize the name. Well, unless you are a Carolina Panthers fan. So saying that, he played for the Carolina Panthers for the past year and a half, and everybody knows that you aren't going to have very many eyes on you, so you're not going to be a household name in Carolina like you would if you played for the teams like the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Rams, just to name a few teams. He was drafted 39th overall in the 2023 draft. He was a top 40 pick. And in many NFL circles, that says a lot. But the Cowboys have been getting crushed on social media because they traded a 4th-round pick for this player when DeAndre Hopkins got traded to the Chiefs for a 5th-round pick. Obviously, he found his legs within the Chiefs offense, scoring 2 touchdowns, and is obviously going to be a key addition to this offense in their bid for a 3-peat. I know, everybody's worst nightmare. But a lot of people overreact when it comes to these trades. Like, I can't believe they gave around a 4th-round pick for a guy that isn't even proven. When DeAndre Hopkins was only traded for a 5th-round pick. But there's a lot of things that go into these trades. One of the things is the age. The other is the contract status. And Mingo is owed $600,000 for the rest of this season. Then he's owed $1.5 million next season. Then $1.9 million the following season. He is under contract until the year 2026. But if you really think about it, and I mean really think about it logically, this is a good trade for the Cowboys. They gave up a 4th-round pick, and if he becomes a starting wide receiver for them on a high-priced team, this is a win-win situation for them. There's a lot of value here. There's good value in a guy who's on the market because clearly he's falling out of favor. The GM that's there now, he didn't draft him, even though he worked in the front office. Obviously, the head coach had nothing to do with him, and he's falling out of favor in the offense. That I can tell you for certain. He's had 43 catches last year, and he has 12 catches this year. And you know he's getting highly outperformed by rookie Xavier Legette. But this is simple shit, guys. You have to pay more for younger players on the trade market. This is strictly about finding the best value and a prospect that you want to trade for, and the Cowboys perform that to a T. They give a 4th-round pick, which really isn't that much to begin with. But on the other side of the fence, if you want to judge the Cowboys for this, I get it. But there's one thing I will judge the Cowboys on, and that is their draft grades. On the prospects that they graded, they seriously need to get past this shit because it is holding them back. I mean, at this point, they might have had a low draft grade on Derrick Henry. Maybe that's why they didn't go after him in free agency. I joke, I kid, but seriously, it's a bit much. They had a high draft grade on Trey Lance, and look at what that has gotten them. I'll wait. It's gotten them absolutely nowhere. They basically told the 49ers that because they have a high grade on Trey Lance, we are going to give you a better draft pick than everybody else. I mean, who's to tell that Big Jerry didn't think that Trey Lance was the future of the Cowboys franchise and it wasn't going to be Dak Prescott? Maybe that's why it took so long for them to pay him, because they were trying to figure out if Trey Lance is a real deal or if he is a bust like the 49ers found out. We have no proof about this, and we don't know the answer to that question. It's just me doing some hypothesizing here, guys. But back to the main point, which is Jonathan Mingo. You have to think about how many teams were actually interested in this guy, because let's say the Raiders were interested in him. They're obviously going to have a higher 4th-round pick than the Cowboys. So that's a red flag in itself. How many teams were actually interested in trading for Mingo? The big problem with the Cowboys and Jerry Jones, who runs the whole damn show, is the fact that you have Jerry always harping on the fact that he has a high grade on this prospect. It happened with Trey Lance, and it's happening again with Jonathan Mingo, who again was a top 40 draft pick. It's always like coming from an oil guy, okay? Just like Jerry Jones, it's like he's trying to strike oil, find value, whatever you want to call it. They're almost like teenage me trading baseball cards Like, I can tell when a player is going to have a down year. So I'm going to trade that card away, right? And then it turns around and that player is having a better year than I had imagined. And so guess what? I want that card back. And then I try to get that card back, and guess what? I can't get it back because I don't have the right value. But just like they did 2 years ago, the Cowboys traded a fourth-round pick for Trey Lance, and it was reported back then that the 49ers didn't get a better offer than what the Cowboys gave them. And who did the 49ers receive in that fourth-round pick? They got a starting safety, Mustafa, who's looking like an absolute pure beast out there right now. I mean, the Cowboys don't even have Trey Lance as their backup. He was their third-string quarterback all season long. I mean, now he's the backup because Dak is basically injured for the rest of the season. But this trade has been an absolute failure for the Cowboys, and I'm pretty sure everybody in the sports world saw it coming. But I get that as an organization, you try to find cheap players and hope that they become star players for you. I get that aspect of this whole ordeal. But how many times do you try to strike gold and it end up coming up just mud? I mean, by all reports, you were the only team trying to trade for Jonathan Mingo. It doesn't get much worse than that. But for education purposes, I did a little research myself. A little bit of digging on this prospect. 6'2", 200 pounds. He's really fast, but his route running needs a lot of work. He's a really raw player that is going to require a considerable amount of work just to be able to see him get on the field. This isn't the type of player that you can just trade for and put them on the field. This is not DeAndre Hopkins. But one thing Mingo does have going for him is that he is a young prospect. He has time to develop, but he's definitely not a plug-and-play player like right now. I mean, we can compare the players all we want, but we definitely cannot compare the traits. Like, they are not even in the same galaxy. You have DeAndre Hopkins, who probably isn't even going to be on the Chiefs next year because the Chiefs just can't afford that type of wide receiver. And then you have a guy in Mingo who will be on the Cowboys next year. Comparing these trades, whether it was a fourth-round pick or a fifth-round pick, it's just stupid shit. And everybody just needs to stop. Because it's not a parallel. But one thing we can't question is the Cowboys as a whole. I think they, as an organization, have become massively over-obsessed with their draft grades. And when a player has a question marks, the Cowboys just want to jump all over it and trade for him because they have a good draft grade on him. A year and a half, 2 years later, a draft grade is pretty irrelevant. I mean, after 2 to 2.5 years, you kind of know who this player is in the NFL. Yeah, I understand. You probably feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, and I feel like I'm doing it as well. But how many times are the Cowboys going to continue to go down this road and end up with egg on their face when it doesn't work out? I mean, when you really think about it, the Cowboys draft really well. They have for a few years now. And you are just now giving up a fourth-round pick who obviously the team could really use. I mean, just look at how the guys have been playing this year. It's not like you can give away a fourth-round pick, especially on a guy who isn't a plug-and-play player. Like, this could be a rotation player for your team next year. If you want your reasoning as to why the Cowboys did this, it can be answered in 8 words. Jerry thinks he is smarter than everyone else. That is really what it boils down to. And I am 100% sure at this point, Cowboys Nation is 100% over it. The Commanders, boy, they made a move. Once upon a time, Marshawn Lattimore was one of the top corners in the game. And then, like many times, injuries happened. Injuries in 2022 and 2023, and as a matter of fact, he's been pretty banged up this year as well. He's been to countless Pro Bowls and is just a great high-end player to have on your team. Commanders ended up giving up a 3rd and a 5th-round pick for Lattimore. But there were reports that the Chiefs were actually involved in trade talks with the Saints as well. And when you have a high-priced team with expensive quarterback, he's got Travis Kelce, Chris Jones. That is an expensive team. And when the Saints are asking for at least a 3rd and a 5th-round pick, that might be a little bit too steep for the Chiefs because they value their draft picks, especially on an expensive team that they got right now. Could the Chiefs use him? Absolutely. But then there are question marks around the player, and your defensive backs are playing pretty well up to this point. I understand they got injuries, but there isn't a point to take a risk like this. But if you were the Commander's spot, you have a young quarterback who doesn't cost very much, and you are in a spot to give away those 2 picks for a player that could be a massive upgrade in your secondary. But for the next 4 years, the Commanders have the great option of bringing in more expensive players, more top-tier talent, because they don't have an expensive quarterback like Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Dak Prescott. The list goes on. So the Commanders can look at a trade like this with cleaner eyes. I personally think that this trade is a little risky. You're trading for an injury-plagued defensive back. You're giving up considerable amount of draft capital on a team that has been pretty freaking ridiculous throughout the season. I mean, let's be real. Nobody expected the Commanders to be in this position and basically set the league on fire, and it has been one hell of a great story so far. But over the next 8 days, we're going to see what type of team the Commanders truly are. You got the Steelers on Sunday, and then you have the Eagles on the following Thursday. I mean, they could easily walk away from these next 2 games sitting at 7-4 and a wild card team and a game behind the Eagles for the NFC East. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a wild card team, but I'm just saying that this next 8 days stretch is going to be challenging for the Commanders. I mean, the Commanders are looking at their first 10-win season since 2012. That's 12 freaking years, man. And in 2012, they did win the NFC East under Mike Shanahan and lost in the wild card game. But to put it lightly, I mean, the Commanders have not been relevant since Robert Griffin III was at quarterback. To have a quarterback that is doing what Daniels is doing right now is putting so much hope into the franchise, into what they can become. Like, I think this is the greatest story in the NFL so far this season. I don't think the Commanders franchise has felt this amount of hope for decades. But to be aggressive like the Commanders were to get Lattimore, I just don't know if it was necessary, because you are giving up some pretty good draft capital on a team that is currently still rebuilding. They're obviously ahead of the rebuild, though they're not playing like they are rebuilding right now. So it's going to be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. You just never know how it's going to play out when you trade for an injury-riddled players. But it's going to be hard to see what the Commanders are until they play in this 5-game stretch against the Steelers and the Eagles. Steelers on Sunday and the Eagles the following Thursday night. So I think we'll know a whole lot more about this team after those 2 games. The Detroit Lions, they made a trade for Zadarius Smith, who has had a fantastic career. He really has and still has 5 sacks this year. It's a solid player. Obviously, if you're talking to the Cleveland Browns, you are discussing trading for Myles Garrett. But a little bit like the Raiders, the whole point of drafts and the whole point of acquiring players is to get those guys, even though both franchises are in shambles, and you have to listen. Now, I do understand being on the Raiders, even if we get a couple number ones and we trade them to the Lions, well, if they're good for the next couple of years, those picks are number 30 and number 31. What is that exactly going to do for a Raiders franchise? If I can get multiple ones and multiple twos and my franchise just overall sucks, clearly they're saying no. And who knows, even willing to get that aggressive. I mean, you look around the NFC and it's never going to be this more wide open. It just never is. I mean, the 49ers, for one, even if they start to come on, you have Brandon Ayuk, who has a messed up knee. He's gone for the season. So he was a key player in beating them last season. And the 49ers making a playoff run, I mean, he was one of their better offensive weapons. Obviously, the question marks with Christian McCaffrey. We just saw you beat the shit out of the Packers, and Minnesota definitely isn't up to snuff with the Lions. They aren't going to beat them in the playoffs. But we're going to learn a lot about them over the next couple weeks. I mean, they play the Commanders on next Thursday. So they win that, like they're clearly be headed towards, a home playoff game and winning that division. But Aiden Hutchinson was kind of lucky in a sense, the way when he broke his leg, it was a clean break. And now there are reports coming out that Aiden Hutchinson could come back for the Super Bowl if the Lions make it there. And so Zadarius Smith could be just holding the line until he comes back. But one thing is true, you have to think that the Lions were trying to get Max Crosby. And I just think that the Raiders were probably asking for multiple ones, multiple twos, and a couple of players, and that just wasn't feasible for the Lions, who are trying to ramp themselves up as Super Bowl contenders. For me, growing up as a Barry Sanders fan, watching him play was unbelievable, and then seeing how the Lions didn't give him help over the years, seeing how the Lions have just resurrected themselves from the ground up, it's just been amazing to watch. Like, when it comes to the two best teams in football right now, when they're playing at their best, I see the Ravens, even though they don't have the best record, but I see the Ravens and the Lions right now. No teams are blowing other teams out like these two teams are. And both of these teams are playing as one. Like, the team chemistry is just unbelievable on the Lions. You see it every single time their cleats hit the field, every time they get on the gridiron. I don't think that I can overstate what an unbelievable job Dan Campbell and the Lions have done turning this team around, because just remember a few years ago, like, they had nothing. And they were just a general losing sensation of the league. And now they are just dominant. If you would have told me, or anybody else for that matter, in NFL circles, that in 20 years, the Lions would become a dominant force to deal with in the NFL, everybody would laugh in your face. But this is a real deal. Not to mention, they're doing this in a division where Minnesota is actually pretty damn good without Kirk Cousins. And then you have the Packers. The Packers, they're pretty damn good as well. And then you have the Bears. Well, they're kind of on the struggle bus and have been for the past couple of weeks, but that's the Bears. Oh yeah, the Lions are doing this in this division, and it's highly impressive. And if you haven't taken notice, I think it's time you start to give them their flowers, especially Jared Goff. Pittsburgh Steelers. The last thing I am going to touch on is the Steelers. They made a couple of trades that improved their team. Mike Williams was traded from the Jets to the Steelers, and it just And it wasn't just last year where Mike Williams had to make a decision to sign with the Jets or the Steelers. Well, he never left New York to visit Pittsburgh, and I'm pretty sure that you can say with 100% confidence, even without me talking to him, that he made the wrong decision signing with the Jets. If he's looking back now, like, damn, you went to the Jets instead of the Steelers, that was a grand mistake. By you, the Jets weren't even using you, and Aaron Rodgers didn't even give a damn that you were on the team. That was obvious if you watched the Pat McAfee show when Aaron Rodgers was on there. Like, that one kind of hurt a little bit, kind of hurt the ego just a touch. Now, Mike Williams, don't get me wrong, it's not a slam dunk type trade because Williams is definitely not the wide receiver that he once was. All of the injuries, that's kind of how it goes. But you could see last week with the Jets, like, he had a little bit more hop to his step and his routes. We're looking pretty crisp. Like, he's got a little bit something left, and that is only going to help Russell Wilson and the Steelers, for sure. They gave up a fifth-round pick for him, which isn't bad. You got him and Pickens, and you have two big-body wideouts where Russell Wilson can just chuck it deep for those 50-50 balls. And in a nutshell, that is Russell Wilson's MO. Play great defense. Have TJ Watt beast mode it down. And you got a tough team, a possible wild card team, maybe more. I mean, it's hard to say that the Steelers will overcome the Ravens and take over the division, but they are going to be a good team. But on the other side of the fence, you have the Ravens, who lose to teams that they are not supposed to. It's happened a few times this season. And they got the Washington Commanders on Sunday. You know that there is going to be a consistent pass rush, and Russell Wilson has injected life into the Steelers' offense. There is actually a passing game now when it comes to the offense, unlike when Justin Fields was starting, and with that brings the running game. I know a lot of people say the running game brings the passing game. No, it's the other way around. But you're going to have a good running game with Warren and Harris. The fact that the Steelers can push it down the field now with Russell Wilson, Pickens, and now with Mike Williams. So, yeah, if I was a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I would have a little hope injected into my veins, and I would be a very happy fan right now. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you need to temper these expectations a little bit. You're not Super Bowl contenders by any means, but you can win a playoff game. You can possibly win the division if the Ravens continue to slip up. So, yeah, there's some excitement there. I mean, you can dial it back to recent memory. It's a lot better than what's been there the past couple of years. So, yeah, keep your heads up, Steelers fans. Be excited. As many of you know, if you are a returning Hot Zone sportser, then you know that Hot Zone Sports is going to keep it real 100% of the time. Saying that, Billy Napier's seat has been scorching hot all season long. Like the lakes of fire type hot. Biblical, if you want to say so. But apparently the entire world was wrong on that, and it looks like for the foreseeable future, his job is quite secure. Shocking. Florida Athletic Director Scott Strickland said in a statement Thursday that Napier, quote, will be the head football coach of the Florida Gators. Napier's future has been a source of constant speculation this season as Florida failed to finish above 500 in his first two seasons with the program, and looks destined for another non-winning season in the current 2024 season. Quote, UF's commitment to excellence, and a championship caliber program is unwavering, Strickland said in his statement. In these times of change across college athletics, we are dedicated to a disciplined, stable approach that is focused on long-term sustained success for Gator athletes, recruits, and fans. End quote. Quote, I am confident that Billy will meet the challenges and opportunities ahead. We will work alongside him to support any changes needed to elevate Gator football. As college athletics evolves, UF is committed to embracing innovation and strategy, ensuring the Gators thrive in today's competitive landscape. End quote. That doesn't make you laugh. I don't know what will. After losing to Georgia in Week 10, Florida is now 4-4, with games against number 5 Texas, number 14 LSU, and number 16 Ole Miss ahead before Florida State at the end of the season. Assuming to win against the Seminoles, Florida would need to go 1-2 against those 3 ranked teams to finish 6-6 and qualify for a bowl. Florida enters Saturday's game against the Longhorns, facing the possibility that number 3 quarterback Aiden Warner will be the team's starting quarterback. Graham Mertz is out for the season because of his ACL injury, and freshman DJ Lagway suffered a hamstring injury against Georgia. Lagway had to be carried off. Lagway had to be carried to a waiting cart after the injury and is officially listed as questionable on the Gators injury report. Also, you got your top wide receiver, Eugene Wilson, who's listed as out, and your number 1 running back, Montrell Johnson, who's also listed as questionable. Both Wilson and Johnson missed the loss to Georgia, and Wilson has appeared in just 4 games this season. I'm not saying that this game won't be competitive against the Longhorns, because it won't be. This is not going to be a knockout, drag-out fight. Not going to be a slobber knocker. This game could get ugly quickly, and there's no other way around it. Overall, the Gators are 15-18 since Napier was hired from Louisiana at the end of the 2021 season. He replaced Dan Mullen after Florida went from 11-2 in 2019, 8-4 in 2020, and 5-6 under Mullen before he was fired with 1 game left to go in the season. If Florida wanted to move on from Napier this season, it would have to pay a buyout of over $20 million. And a bigger complicating factor is also the university's lack of a president. Former United States Senator Ben Sasse announced his resignation in July, and former school president Kent Fuchs has been the school's interim president since August. This feels like the Florida fans are kind of handcuffed in a sense, but I do know that fans are not satisfied when you look at the University of Florida. What they remember is Urban Meyer, his national championships, and they have not really been relevant since then. Yes, you had a couple of good years, but nothing consistent. Seems like a lot of schools are going away from firing in the middle of the season. But really, if you look at DJ Lagway, what is going to happen? He's obviously going to miss some time. But let's say Napier gets fired. What happens with Lagway? Does he stay with Florida or does he transfer? That is the future of the Gators, and we all know that we live in the day and age where transfers are highly prevalent. So maybe this is the Gators just trying to save face, but I do know one thing for certain. His seat couldn't be any hotter. Whether or not his AD decided to come out and say, all right, we got you, it doesn't matter to me. His seat is still hot. Even if Napier does stay for next season, you still play your college football in the Southeastern Conference, the SEC. What are you going to end up with? 8 wins? And that's on the high end of the spectrum. Or do you end up with another 4 to 6 win season? Only time is going to tell. But I don't see how Napier continues to stay the head coach of the Florida Gators when he hasn't given the fans, media, and the university no reason to keep that job. But really, the crazy thing that's going on with the Gators this year, even as much as they have struggled, and it has been a lot, the entire team is still buying in. Like most of these games, they are still playing highly competitive. His team has played their best ball. I mean, they're not winning a lot of these games, but they have stayed a cohesive group and competitive. They fought Georgia. They fought Tennessee. So I'll give you your props there, Billy Napier. But that's the minimum you're supposed to do for a major football program. Kalen DeBoer, Kirby Smart, Ryan Day, any team that matters has their team bought in. But if you're making Billy Napier money, $7.37 million per year, then you better have your team bought in. But when you have a program where in 2022, the recruiting class was ranked 18th, your win-loss record was 6-7. Your recruiting class was ranked 13th in 2023. You were 5-7. 13th in 2024. You're 4-4. And 51st currently in recruiting rankings. There is a disconnect here. You ultimately get judged as a head coach of a high quality program, or any program for that matter, based on your wins and losses. And this season they came out of the gates 1-2 and very cold. Nobody really cares about how amazing your facilities are or how beautiful the weather is in Florida, the sports science of Florida, the strength and conditioning. I could go on and on and on. All they care about is your win-loss record. And it's really hard to recover from a really cold start when you start the season, at least how they started the season. But the AD decided to give Napier another year. Maybe it's because of the buyout. Maybe the Gators believe in him. Could be a multitude of reasons. Gators fans may not be happy with it when they expect to be at the top of the SEC every year, but this is what they got to work with. But in situations like these, you're usually just delaying the inevitable. They could be just delaying it in reality, waiting for another hat to drop, whichever hat that is. But when you have this whole revenue sharing thing, and yes, I'm going to get into this, the NIL, you don't exactly have the resources to go up and fire 50 to 60 to $70 million in an entire football staff anymore. It's just not possible. Even at the University of Florida, where money is abundant, you just can't up and fire these staffs anymore. But for the foreseeable future, you will have Billy Napier as the University of Florida head football coach. How this ends, nobody knows. I do not have this little crystal ball around me right now. But I can tell you one thing. There's not a lot of upside to keeping Billy Napier for another year. All right, now let's get into the games that will be going on this weekend. And boy, there are some blockbuster games. You got number 10 Notre Dame facing off against Florida State. Notre Dame is a 26.5 point favorite. Notre Dame is 7-1, and Florida State is 1-8. I think this game was scheduled. Many thought this was going to be a highlight game of the week when it was scheduled. Could have had college football playoff ramifications, but that is not the case here. Notre Dame is going to win this, and they are going to win big and move on to 8-1. You got number 2 Ohio State going up against Purdue. Guys, Purdue is just really bad this year. This is not a trap game, so don't even think about it. They are not going to be stepping on each other's toes. Ohio State is going to win, and they are going to win big in this spot. I mean, if you look at the line, they are favored by 38 points. Purdue could play the best game they could probably play in the history of Purdue football, and they would still lose by 20 points. Okay, maybe that's a stretch. They did have Drew Brees at one point. Just throwing that out there. It's just, this is not going to be an entertaining game unless you are a fan of the Buckeyes. because the Buckeyes are going to throw up a crap ton of points. Ohio State, I got them in a landslide. Just like the last game, this game is going to played at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Number 5, Texas faces off against the Florida Gators. The Gators have a lot of injuries on their team. They are going to be without their number 1 wide receiver. They're going to be without their number 1 running back. And they are going to be starting their third-string quarterback. Texas is favored by 21.5 points. Florida will put up a fight because they have put up fights in damn near every single game they have been in this season. There's something about Billy Napier. This team fights for him. They believe in him. And just about every game that they play in, they are competitive. But for the next 3 games, Florida is going to have to go 1-2 in these games against 3 ranked opponents in order to somehow make it to a bowl game. I do not foresee the Gators keeping this game close. Texas is going to win this big. There are lots of games we could talk about here, but I am going to start off with what I think is going to be the highlight game of the week. Both of these teams are on the brink of not being able to play in the college football playoff. You have number 11 Alabama with a 6-2 record versus number 15 LSU. The Crimson Tide are favored by 2.5 points. This is going to be a monumental game, a game that you will not want to miss. This is quite possibly could be a slobber knocker, a knockout, drag-out fight, a fight in the barn. I personally believe that this game is going to come down to one possession. Turnovers are obviously going to come into play, so whoever wins that turnover battle is basically setting themselves up for a great win. But let's dive a little deeper, shall we? So let's start off by saying this is going to be a night game in Death Valley. So Alabama is going on the road. So if you go by conventional wisdom, you would say Alabama is going into Death Valley at night. There's no chance they are going to win this game. LSU has beaten Ole Miss in overtime. And what a game that was. Oh my gosh. But yeah, you could say that LSU could easily win this game, keep the turnovers down. It's a night game in Death Valley. Yeah, you could say that. But for me, I thought that this was going to come down to all week. It's basically an elimination game for the college football playoff. This is a big game for both of these teams. The way I see it, the loser of the game does not get into the college football playoff. You would have to have a lot of things go right for a 3-loss team to get into the college football playoff. I mean, if you honestly look at all of these teams like Miami, Indiana, BYU, possibly SMU, possibly Colorado, they have a chance. The schedule is set up for Colorado. Just say a lot of things would have to go right for the loser of this game to get into the college playoff with a 9-3 record. Even with Alabama, with their win against Georgia, I do not see them getting into the playoff with a 9-3 record. Was that win against Georgia a great win? Something great for their resume? Yes. But with 3 losses, sorry, you're not getting in. So essentially, this is a playoff game for both of these teams. And both of these teams better come to play. Otherwise, you are not going to win this game. And you will be on the outside looking in of the college football playoff. The biggest question that I see right now is Alabama's defense. In particular, how are they going to be able to keep LSU's explosive offense and Nussmeier to having minimal explosive plays? That is going to be the story of the game. The last time we saw Alabama's defense was against Missouri. Boy, it was a dominating effort. They shut out the Tigers team, who was obviously banged up, top to bottom. Missouri was never going to threaten the Tide in this game. And obviously, that is what happened when they lost 34-0. But this Alabama defense is going to have to play really well in this game, and you are going to find out quickly how good this Alabama secondary really is. Not to mention, Alabama has not Not to mention, Alabama has been quite sloppy most of the season with penalties, and their offense has been really inconsistent. LSU has a lot of weapons in their passing game, and Alabama hasn't proven that they can cover particularly deep. LSU has a lot of advantages when it comes to their passing game, and Alabama hasn't showed that they have a great pass rush. But another thing is when you think of Nussmeier recently, he has been pretty inconsistent. In his last 4 games, he has thrown 7 interceptions, guys, including the massive one that changed the complexion of the Texas A&M game. I mean, they did have a 10-point lead on A&M on the road in Kyle Field. Like, that's still this team. This is still the team that beat Ole Miss, even though they didn't have the lead until the actual end of the game. Having said that, like Alabama has given up some explosive plays, this has been my concern since way back when I saw them play against South Alabama. If you haven't checked out those highlights, you probably should. There are a lot of issues with this Alabama defense, though. For the first time in a long time, you can actually run on the edge of this defense, something that you couldn't have even thought about in the Nick Saban era. Explosive plays down the field are also to be had, 50-50 balls. Now, can LSU take advantage of that? We're going to find out on Saturday. But if there's one thing that we do know, Nussmeier has to protect the football. He cannot have any untimely errors in this game. The LSU Tigers just can't afford it. Nussmeier has thrown the ball 50 times in his last 2 games. If Alabama can continue to force LSU to throw the ball that many times, that is only going to favor them in this game. The question on the other side of the ball is LSU. Do they have the athleticism available to be able to stop Jalen Milroe from running the football? If you look at past performances, and at this point, that is all we have to go off of, you could easily say that the answer to that question is going to be no. LSU can't stop Jalen Milroe. LSU couldn't stop Lenore Sellers. He ran for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. The crazy thing, he only played in the first half of that game. Then you have A&M's Marcel Reed. He ran for 62 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he only played the second half of that game. So saying that, you had these guys go up against LSU, both of them only playing a half, and they put up these types of numbers against this LSU defense. So now you have Jalen Milroe on the other side, and in many minds, he is considered the best mobile quarterback in the country. Hands down. How can you convince me to believe that Alabama is not going to have any success against the LSU defense? And a guy that can play all quarters. I just don't see how Milroe doesn't have the same success as these other players did. So I get it. It's a rivalry game. You're playing in Death Valley at night. But if you're not going to be able to stop Jalen Milroe and his athleticism and his electric play ability throughout the entirety of this game, none of these other precursors matter to me. Then you have the running attack outside of their running back. This is what makes them difficult to defend, in my opinion. You got Haynes, Miller, Richard Young, and their last game against Missouri, they ran for 271 yards on a clip of 7 yards per carry. Saying that, they are a very dangerous team when it comes to the rushing attack. And if there's one thing that has been shown throughout the entirety of the season, LSU has difficulty stopping the run. But let's do a hypothetical. Let's say they do stop the Alabama rushing attack. The last I checked, Alabama still has Ryan Williams, who is probably one of the more electric wide receivers in America. And guess what? He's a freshman. And he hasn't really done much since he played Georgia. So if you're expecting a breakout game, I think he's due. Now let's move on to the Georgia-Ole Miss game. My eyes are going to be peeled on this one. Georgia at Ole Miss. Georgia is coming in at number 3 in the country in the brand spanking new playoff rankings, and Ole Miss is at number 16. I was going to do a video. Sorry, Mike. I was going to do a video about the playoff rankings, but, work, get busy. Shit happens. My bad, guys. There have been a lot of people saying this week how Georgia could be stumbling into this game, how Carson Beck isn't playing up to his ability. I know, I said the same shit, but let's not get it twisted. Carson Beck has not played good at all this year. I subtract the games against the garbage teams, but for the most part, Carson Beck has not played the part. And if we look at Ole Miss, oh wait, they just scored another touchdown. Yeah. They were on fire last game. So if we're playing this game on the worst version of the Georgia Bulldogs and the best version of the Ole Miss Rebels, then yeah, I'd go with Ole Miss. But we need to stop that narrative. Come on. The problem with that narrative is that in big moments, in big games, Georgia shows up. Just take a look at at the Texas game. If you feel any sort of hesitation, people thought that they were stumbling into that game, and they take Texas down. Since 2021, and Georgia is 18-3 versus ranked opponents. All 3 of those losses, ironically, is against Alabama. Who coached that Alabama team? Nick Saban. But if you think about it, 63 points is really nice against Arkansas. But when this time you have been able to trust Ole Miss, when was the last time you have been able to trust them? You have not been able to trust anything Ole Miss has done. That horrendous loss against LSU. LSU came back and beat them in overtime, and then they had that loss to Kentucky. And we have seen what Kentucky has become, and it is not good. It is looking like a really bad loss at a really bad time. The offense for the Rebels currently is pretty banged up if you look at it. Their starting running back is going to be out of the game. Their best wide receiver is out. But if you want to come out and say that if Carson Beck continues the trend of playing like he has and Ole Miss plays the way they have, yes, they have a chance in this game and a valid chance. But my intuition here is Georgia in a big spot and in a big game. That's what I keep reverting back to. When the Bulldogs' backs are against the wall, they usually come back and have a dominating performance, just like they did against Texas, like I said earlier. But if there is one thing we know about the Georgia Bulldogs, is the fact that their offense does not play very well. They have the type of defense that you can lean on. As we saw in the Texas game, the Georgia offense did not play very well throughout the entirety of the game, and they had to lean on their defense. And we all saw what happened there. I mean, there is a crazy stat that I saw over the past couple of days as I was preparing for the show. Georgia has won 52 straight games versus teams not named Alabama. The last team they lost to was in 2020 versus the Florida Gators. Just let that sink in for a minute. I'll give you a second to digest it. Okay, the second is over. The next thing is when it has Ole Miss ever proven that they can win a big game. They haven't. So you have to go and judge them off of their past performances. In their past performances, they have proven that they don't win big games. They had a game earlier in the season against LSU. Well, guess what? They took their foot off the gas and LSU came back and ended up winning that game. That was a big game. Ole Miss proved that they couldn't win that game. And in this spot, this is another big game. They're going to need to win this game in order to stay in the hunt for a possible college football playoff spot. But they have not proven to anybody that they can win these types of games. I mean, if you really think about it, Ole Miss is 0-14 versus top 5 teams under Lane Kiffin. And these spots, their average loss is by 21 points. So when the football world and in the betting world, you go off of what you know. If Ole Miss hasn't proven to you that they can win these big games, you obviously, as a bettor, are not going to bet on this team. And the same goes for me in this spot. I like Georgia in this game. Whether or not Carson Beck has struggled this season, I can overlook because Georgia's defense is dominant and they have played the part all season long. Carson Beck is just too good of a quarterback to be throwing 11 interceptions in his last 5 games. He's obviously going to have to get that under control. Otherwise, Georgia will not win another championship. Whether they win this game or not is beside the fact. So do I think this is going to be a great game to watch? Yes, it is. It's going to be very entertaining, very drama-filled. You know it's going to be with Lane Kiffin. But the bottom line is this: Georgia is going to end up coming out on top. They will win this game. It could be close, but Georgia's defense at the end will come up with the stop or the turnover that they need to win this game. The last game I want to touch on in this episode is Michigan and Indiana. I mean, who really thought that Indiana was going to come into this game undefeated? Definitely not me. Curt Cignetti wasn't exactly a household name at the beginning of the season, but boy, is he now. Now, I get what you're saying. They haven't played anybody relevant. I understand all that. They beat Western Illinois 77-3. UCLA 42-13. Charlotte 52-14. Maryland 42-28. Northwestern 41-24. Nebraska 56-7. Washington 31-17. And up until that Michigan State game, they hadn't trailed all season long. Then they played Michigan State, and they didn't score a single point in the first quarter and were down 10-0. At the end of the first, they scored 47 unanswered points right after that. Yeah, they won that game 47-10. I don't care who you are or what you do, or if you're an Indiana fan or an Ohio State fan, but you have to admit all these wins are impressive. Well, except, Charlotte and Western Illinois. Nobody really counts those. But honestly, when a team has a schedule like this, yes, it's not an impressive schedule. I'll agree with you there. But this team has beat every single opponent that has been on their schedule. And all you can do as a team is beat the teams that are on your schedule. And Indiana has done that very well up to this point. At no point during the season did I think that they were going to be ranked number 8 in the country. I mean, honestly, when was the last time Indiana was ranked number 8 in football? But they are doing this with a new head coach, Curt Cignetti, and he has won everywhere he has been. The story has been told many times over this season, but that doesn't make it any less impressive. So here is his first opportunity over the next couple of games to prove that Indiana is for real and is a force to be reckoned with on the national landscape. Not to mention that Curtis Rourke, the quarterback for the Hoosiers, is number 2 in the country in passing efficiency rating. In case you haven't watched, he is really good. On top of that, they are the number 2 scoring team in the country. Meanwhile, Michigan on the other side, you can only describe them offensively in one word: horrible. They continue to struggle moving the ball offensively. At this point, they have tried just about everything, used every asset they have on their team, and it's just not working. The one weapon they do have, Colston Loveland, the talented tight end, is being dominant, but if they don't throw it his direction, Michigan does nada offensively. A glaring weakness for the Wolverines is the fact that they are ranked 128th in passing. That is freaking wild. But in their last 4 of 5 games, they've also been held under 4 yards per rush. If you aren't catching on yet, yeah, it's really bad in Ann Arbor, Michigan. But it's kind of what we expected after Harbaugh left, right? But Indiana gets talked about a lot on the national landscape about their offense. And yes, their offense is good. There's no doubt about that. But one thing that does not get talked about often enough is the fact that how good Indiana's defense actually is. They are a top 10 scoring defense as well. So they're dominating on both sides of the ball. Now I know what you're going to say. Well, Indiana hasn't played a great schedule. They haven't played a lot of the top teams. Well, they're about to jump their feet into the beef of their schedule. And we're truly going to find out how good Indiana really is. And up to this point, there's a reason why they are ranked number 8 in the country. But when the media talked about Indiana, they always talk about who have you played. That's relevant. Give me one good win. And I get all that. But every game they have been in, they've won by a minimum of 14 points. They beat Nebraska when they were on top of the national scope, 56-7. That's not anything to be scoffed at. I will whittle this down. It comes down to complete brand bias. Yes, roll your eyes all you want, but that's what it is. If Georgia was playing the schedule like this and they were sitting at 9-0, they would be talked about more. They would be higher up in the rankings, and they wouldn't be judged that much. Oh, wait, last year, I did a little digging myself. Last year at this time, they had a similar schedule as to what Indiana had played, and they weren't judged that much, and they were still at the top of the rankings. Because they have the name Indiana is not a power football school. Indiana leads the FBS in point differential per game with 32. Every team in the country up to this point has played a game where their fans look at the final box score and they're like, what in the hell just happened? Indiana hasn't done that. They haven't played the type of game. They've been dominant in every single game they played. Now, if you're on the side where you say Indiana hasn't played anyone, once again, I will say you are correct, but I will also push back and say with the schedule that they have been given, they have dominated every single team on that schedule, and this is the type of consistency that you want when you're trying to make your program relevant. And Curt Cignetti is the model of that consistency. He has won everywhere he has been, and he is leading Indiana to their first 10-win season in program history if they beat Michigan tomorrow. So say what you want about Indiana, but they have been the model of consistency all season long, dominated everybody on their schedule. And that's really all you can ask if you want to be one of the top teams in the nation. And when it comes to Michigan, they are not running on all cylinders. If anything, they are limping into this game. And Curt Cignetti has this type of chip on his shoulder that wants to prove everybody wrong and put respect on Indiana's name as a football school. They may be ranked number 8, but they are a top 6 team. They are a top 6 team, in my opinion. And they have played the part week in and week out. I do not doubt this man, and I do not doubt this team. I have a high amount of confidence in the Hoosiers against Michigan right now. I do not expect Michigan to put up much of a fight against Indiana. Indiana will win again by at least 14 points. Now, if you are new to The Burn and Hot Zone Sports, go ahead and click that subscribe button. And if you like the video, go ahead and like it. And if you want to push back with anything whatsoever, go ahead and comment. I will respond to every single comment you guys put out. Unless I'm with my family, then it might take a little bit. But if you have not subscribed to this channel, go ahead and do so. What are you waiting for? You don't want to miss a single episode. We are ramping things up. This is our second episode of the week. We will continue to push out episodes every week. And we're going to be posting shorts very often, guys. So if you have not subscribed, go ahead and do so. And do yourself a favor and click that notification bell. I don't know if it's over there or if it's over there. Whatever. It's over there somewhere. But if you have not followed us on Facebook, Twitter, or X, TikTok, Instagram, Threads, we are on all of them. So go ahead and do your boy a favor. Follow us everywhere and join the Hot Zone Sports Nation. So this is Ryan Van Deaver and The Burn signing off. I hope everybody has this absolutely amazing Saturday and an amazing Sunday as well. Enjoy that football, and I will see you on Monday. Peace.